everyone, I'm Melody Maraca.
And I'm Bill C.
Welcome back to the Into the Heart of U2 podcast, where two longtime fans discuss U2 music album by album and tour by tour, the fan experience, and the perception of U2 and cultural consciousness.
Yeah, Melody and we came of age with U2. We saw it happen in real time. And as we sit here in 2023, we still care about this band, but we're concerned about their legacy. So as we take a trip back through the band's history, we're going to try and place it in proper context and get to the bottom of whether U2 is one of the greats of all time, or are the haters right after all?
Right. So in part one of this war episode, which we certainly hope that you have listened to, we discussed the make it or break it situation the band found themselves in just prior to the recording of the War album, and the band's decision to move away from the introspective, atmospheric music of Boy in October towards more aggressive, outward-facing rock and roll that did not shy away from addressing hot-button issues like the Troubles in Northern Ireland. But now we're going to take a look at the reaction to the album when it came out and the subsequent tour, which really changed everything for this band.
All right. So let's start with the album cover. It's iconic. And I still have the album framed and up on my wall. Did you know that, Melody?
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
You're smiling. So we have Peter Rowan from Bono's Neighborhood. He's back for his second appearance on a U2 album, but this time he doesn't look so innocent. Now he looks like he's grown up in a war-torn country. The cut on his lip, the piercing eyes, his arms behind his head like he's surrendering. The black and white photo contrasted by the big red bold block letters, simple, striking, U2 War. I can't emphasize enough how taken I was when I was holding that album in my hands the day it came out, and then dropping the needle down and hearing Larry's military drums that start off Sunday Bloody Sunday.
Yeah, I remember very well holding it in my hands as well. It was one of those, what do you call those albums, Bill, that fold out? What do you call them again? I don't know. It's been a long time.
Gateway fold? Is that what it was?
Gatefold. I think
Gatefold. There we go.
Gatefold. Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
So yeah, I remember that really well. It was this big format. I also remember it was the first time that lyrics were included.
Although not all of them.
That's right. There weren't all of them, but it was the first time that they were there.
Absolutely.
And I really remember, I guess it's kind of a visceral memory of holding that album, as you said. But anyway, U2, they crack it with this album, right? It's their first #1 album in Britain.
Yep.
And of their newfound success, Bono said, there's nothing like being at #1. Everything terrible that ever happened to you in your life was no longer terrible in that moment. I love that quote.
Yes.
The album had also reached #12 in the States and was certified gold here during its initial release. The album received mostly positive reviews in the States.
Mm-hmm.
However, it got some pretty brutal reviews in the UK.
Bloody limeys.
That was Bill saying that, not me, who just defiled our UK listeners. Direct your anger towards him. All right.
I'll behave.
So now let's get to the tour.
Yes. It's impossible to talk about war without including the war tour. These are songs that are made to be played live. And as the tour progressed, the songs evolved and expanded to meet the growing audience and the size of the venues. U2 was already a great live act, right? But not a particularly focused one. There really wasn't a discernible difference between the Boy and October tours. Pull up a random sampling of any show from either tour. It sounds pretty much the same. The stage looks the same, with the possible exception of Edge. The band's abilities are basically the same. But on the War tour, the band takes a huge step forward. They sound confident, assured, powerful, and they start to understand the value of stagecraft, dynamics, leaving room for improvisation. Not to mention, this is where Willie Williams, who is still with them, he comes on board as show designer, so the lighting and staging are now complementing what the band is putting across.
Yeah, and in collaboration with the band, they come up with the design that features 3 white flags, representative in quite an elegant way of the band's and the album's militant pacifism. Yeah. But let's take a step back. The tour really starts in December 1982, before the album is released, and that leg of the tour is known as the pre-war tour. And here the band try out some of the songs on the album for the first time. This leg swings through halls and theaters in Britain, Scandinavia, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Ireland. And during a show in Belfast, which was on December 20th, Bono supposedly tells the crowd that if they don't like the song Sunday Bloody Sunday, the band will never play it again. But, we all know that Bono is not the most reliable of narrators, but the other members of the band have also commented upon this episode. Fortunately for all of us, the song does go down well with the crowd.
But can I just say that the bootleg of that show does not have that intro of Bono? There's actually a cut which may have contained it, but for what survives, it's just not there. So it remains in mystery.
Interesting. Because usually when Edge says something is true, I tend to think it might be true.
It's the old journalist two source rule.
Right.
Yes.
So the pre-war tour concludes with 3 sold-out shows at Dublin's SFX Hall, which had 1,000-person capacity.
Cozy.
Yeah. Also an interesting number. So they've ended that tour playing to 3,000 folks in Dublin. The war tour proper started in late February 1983, where the band plays a bit over a month in Britain with one performance at a festival in France. And then, after a short break, the band begins a 3-month tour through the States, and I think they dipped into Canada as well. And this happens in late April 1983. Paul McGuinness and the band's strategy, it seems, is to break through to North America, touring state by state and a couple provinces. And when the tour is booked, they're playing in theaters.
Right. But as War starts rising up the charts and the New Year's Day and Two Hearts videos go into heavy rotation on MTV, they have no choice but to move into bigger venues. And by the end of the US leg, they're in larger halls and in the bigger markets, even into arenas. But as the venues get larger and the audiences are pushed further back, Bono starts to go on a mission to break down the barriers and reach every person in the house, even if he has to climb into the audience, perilously along railings and onto balconies and beyond to get there. He seems possessed by a kind of otherness that was impossible to ignore.
Right. And so it was during the US leg that I think that the band played 3 shows that really helped to shape the course of their career going forward. The first show was U2's performance at the US Festival, which is their first festival performance in the States. Now, the US Festival, it was sort of billed as the 1980s answer to Woodstock. The festival, it was the brainchild of Steve Wozniak, who, along with Steve Jobs, was a founder of Apple. And for its time, anyway, the festival was high tech with large video screens and a decent sound system. And it was also a very big deal in terms of media attention and attendance numbers, with over 100,000 people attending each of the 3 days. Now, each day of the festival had a theme. There was new wave, heavy metal, and rock. And the headliners, respectively, were The Clash, Van Halen, and David Bowie. And notably, U2 refused to be included on the New Wave Day, instead insisting on being playing during the Rock Day.
And they could have played right alongside a flock of seagulls. I mean, what were they thinking?
They could have. And actually, this is the first time I saw the band, and I was kind of like, oh man, I kind of wanted to see them on that day, but that's a whole other thing.
Okay, sorry.
So you didn't go to the show, right?
No, I certainly didn't. George, I still hate you for not selling me the ticket. You promised me and I missed out. Sorry. Still very bitter. Please continue.
I will. I'll continue. And since I was there,
yeah,
let me tell you what I actually remember about the show. But don't be bitter.
No.
U2, they played during the afternoon, and it was so hot that day. So I remember that. I mean, blazing hot.
Mhm.
I remember most people attending, at least the ones that I saw, had no idea who the band was. But by the end of the set, most people were really into it. And then there was Bono's crazy desire to connect with the audience, which it was totally infectious. He climbed to, I think most people know this, he climbed to the very top of the stage scaffolding during Electrico. I don't know how many feet up it was. I'm sure it was over 100 feet. But there he was. He climbed up a rope ladder and then shimmied up the scaffolding. And two or three of the road crew followed up along behind him, carrying the white flag with him all the way up to the top. And if I remember correctly, I don't even think he waved the white flag. He just sort of grabbed it and kind of jiggled it around and then threw it off the top of the
Yeah,
stage.
he threw it off. That's what I remember from the film.
Yeah. And I remember him saying, California, here I come, and thinking, this guy's going to fricking jump. What is wrong with this dude? But you know, people were into it. I mean, he did make the connection.
Yeah.
I mean, on its face, it was pretty stupid, but it was mesmerizing.
Yeah. I mean, and Bono's High Wire Act is still going spectacularly well for the now legendary Red Rock show, which was actually only less than a week later than the US Festival on June 5th, 1983, which is our second significant show that shaped the course of their career going forward. And as for Red Rocks, I mean, you had to wonder if God was on the production team. I mean, what with the rain and the dramatic sight of steam coming off the band in this incredible venue carved into natural rock formation in the Rockies to capture the magic of, I mean, really a band taking off.
Yeah, and the film crew that were led by Gavin Taylor, who had worked on Britain's The Tube, they did a great job of masking the fact that the venue was only half full.
That's true.
Paul McGuinness and the band are encouraged, right? They're implored to cancel the show for safety reasons due to the rain and the risk of electrocution. All of the opening acts were canceled. But Paul McGuinness rallies the troops and they go on anyway, since they can't afford to cancel and reschedule the filming. Now, the plan behind the show at Red Rocks is to present the band as, being big and successful. Here they are, they're playing a sold out amphitheater show in the States. The if you see it, it must be true kind of train of thought. And presto, they will cease being a college rock band and become a massive group. And the gambit worked.
Right, but let me interject. Let's not get lost in the details of the drama threatening to short circuit the show. This is another make it or break it moment for the band. And despite the rain, despite the cold, the band are transcendent. And this night, I think, is Exhibit A of Bono at the height of his performing powers. He's connecting, but not showboating. He's emoting, but not sabotaging the show with unnecessary hijinks.
Yeah, and speaking of Bono being in control of the drama, I read somewhere that he ends up saying goodbye multiple times, even more so than Bono usually said goodbye or good night. And that was to give the editors choices, which I thought was quite clever.
Always on his game. And Edge, back to the show, Edge puts on a clinic, alternating breathtakingly between piano and guitar, and Adam and Larry. I mean, I've been hard on those guys. They are tight as hell. A resounding success, Red Rocks. But a couple weeks after Red Rocks, Bono will take it too far. Melody. All through the war tour, he had been going into the audience during Electrico. Like I mentioned, going into the audience, climbing balconies, scaling scaffolding, anything to reach the audience that felt further and further away as the venues got bigger. Tour manager Dennis Sheehan and the band were becoming increasingly concerned he was going to get himself killed or paralyzed.
Yeah, and I think this behavior, it actually started back during the European festival circuit in summer of 1982. That's really when he started climbing the scaffolding to make this connection.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, the band at this point, they put their foot down that he needs to stop completely.
They begged him.
Yeah.
But he wasn't listening, or he couldn't hear once he got on stage. Now, Melody, we were both at the LA Sports Arena, June 17th, 1983. This was their first headlining arena show, and this is the third show we're highlighting to help shape the course of their career going forward. This was to be the tipping point for Bono as a performer. It would never be the same again. Melody, what do you remember that night?
What I really remember is that it was a crazy atmosphere. The energy in the building was off the charts. I remember that security seemed very lax. There was a huge crush at the front of the stage. I remember Bono repeatedly asking the crowd to step back.
I'd also say, I mean, it really became clear from the onset, Bono felt this weight of this being their first headlining arena show. It was obvious, like from the get-go, he had his mind set on getting to the people, at the back of the arena. It felt palpable.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, that's really when I think we need to talk about the moment, right? That was probably the most memorable of the show was during Electrico. And this, of course, this had become a thing during the war tour that Bono was going to do something. And maybe because he was playing the biggest show that they ever done, that he was going to do the biggest something that he'd ever done during that song. And here's how I remember it. And I know, Bill, we were talking about this before we started taping, that there seems to be a lot of different versions of what happened here. But what I remember, the start of the journey is during the Electrico, Bono's on the stage. He climbs up onto the PA and gets onto the first balcony or the loge with the white flag.
Right.
And he starts making his way towards the center of the arena to kind of to get closer to the audience.
This is, again, it's sort of funny. We were laughing. It's almost like a biblical, like an oral tradition or a game of telephone. For such an immortal show, that's actually a shocking lack of coverage. There's only like one photo, an LA Times article we'll get to, and one photo from it. Not a great amount of consensus as to what happened. But anyway, from my vantage point, and I was further back, you were right across the way from him. I was actually further back, but to me, it felt like I didn't even know how he got off the stage into the loge. So thank you. But yeah, then he made his way. What seemed to me, it's been called a balcony. It was like, to me, I think it was the aisleway in between the loge and the colonnade. And he had the white flag. And to me, it seemed like this gesture of him. He was going to march with the white flag down this aisleway and lead people, on this sort of to get to the back of the arena. But of course, he never got there. It was madness. And this is where I remember the flag being stolen. You don't remember it there. This is where our stories don't come together. But that's what makes this fun. So what's the next thing you remember?
So yeah, he was walking in this, and I think you're right. There was an aisleway, and the reason that I remember that particularly is that's exactly where I was standing. I was standing in that little aisleway, breezeway, right in front of the balcony railing. So I remember him coming around the aisleway. For a while, at least, he has the flag. And so what I remember is he comes to a stop about midpoint in the arena simply because he has to. And I think what was going on is not everybody knew where he was until that point or close to that point. So by this point, everyone wants to get close to him. He's getting what he wants, and everyone wants to be there. And he gets stuck literally by the crush of the crowd. There's nowhere else for him to go. So what I remember, and this isn't what you remember, is that's when the white flag gets ripped away from him. Some place in that point. And then there was a lot of pushing and shoving going on and pulling on shirts, which I remember being a very bad look, because here we have a white flag of surrender, and all of a sudden people are stealing this flag because they want a piece of it, and then they want a piece of him. And it was not great.
What I remember next is he tries to escape this crush by going down an aisle that leads to the railing which is the loge, and then down to the next step is there's the floor.
Right.
And I guess at that point he had nowhere else to go, and people were following him down this aisles like this trail of ants, just converging on him, and he literally had nowhere else to go. And ultimately he looks down, and the hands are raised up to catch him, and he literally jumps.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I felt, I didn't know his name at the time, but you had to feel sorry for Dennis Sheehan as well, who was with him this whole time.
The poor Dennis Sheehan, tasked to be his spotter. It was an extraordinary move, but one that put the other fans in peril, who also decided to jump after him. I heard that Dennis Sheehan was one of them that jumped after him because he had to.
No, that actually is in my memory, because Dennis Sheehan was wearing a white shirt. Why do I remember that? And I could be wrong, but I remember him wearing a white shirt. So yes, but I do distinctly remember at least one person following Bono off the railing, for sure.
According to Hilburn's review, that there was at least a couple others, and the whole point was no one was interested in catching them. Right. They caught Bono, but fortunately they didn't get hurt, apparently, but they were put into danger. Bono had taken it too far.
And then it was chaos.
It was chaos
after that, because then Bono has to get back to the stage, and he's now on the floor, and he's mobbed.
And it's halfway back. It was not just a few rows back. He was about halfway back. Is that right?
Absolutely.
And that was a long ass time of the band just, going off on the coda of Electrico. They must be thinking, oh, Bono's just fucked off. What do we do now?
or has he really been injured?
Right, exactly.
Which I would imagine that they probably were concerned at that point, because it took so long for him to get back up on that stage.
It did, and no wonder Dennis Sheehan and the band confronted them afterwards.
Yeah, but Bill, I don't know about you, but I think that was probably the most exciting thing I've ever seen.
I have to say, I've seen hundreds of shows since. I've never seen anything like this. To this day, it's the most extraordinary moment I've ever witnessed. All right, let's get to the famous Hilburn article. As it turns out, the LA Times, Robert Hilburn's review, literally the only document of this moment, really, and it ends up being an article that changed Bono's mind. He basically called it the most thrilling act he'd ever seen, but the most dangerously and questionable act. And basically say, and I never want to see it again. You guys are too good for this. You don't need this. And that is what finally convinced Bono that he had to tone it down and
rein it in.
Rein it in. And that was the end of that version of Bono the performer. Yeah. Which frankly, a part of me does miss, but I get it.
Yeah, and for people that weren't there during it's one could say, oh, it was just theatrics. But if you were there, I don't think somebody who is literally balancing on a balcony railing, which is what he was doing in boots, was just theatrics.
Right.
And there were no nets.
Right. Correct. No, it was an extraordinary night. And I'm grateful I saw it, because
me too.
We didn't know that was going to be the end. We just figured, wow, this is awesome. It happens all the time, I guess.
So after U2 concludes the North American leg of the tour, they play some European festivals in July and August, most notably being their headlining show in Dublin at Phoenix Park, at which over 20,000 people attend. Which is quite a difference from the 3,000 they played in front of over 3 nights, less than a year before. Quite the homecoming, I would say.
Indeed. And then comes Under a Blood Red Sky, which ends up being a massive commercial success, reaching number 2 in Britain and number 28 in the States. Do I sound like Casey Kasem? And, it capitalized brilliantly on the Red Rocks performance, and in particular the iconic Sunday Bloody Sunday video MTV played to death, best remembered for Bono raising the white flag and the call in response, "No more, no more."
Yep. And if anybody's keeping track, Under a Blood Red Sky was released on November 21st, 1983. It was produced by Jimmy Iovine. And I think that the 8-song mini album was really a testament to U2 as a great live act at that time. But I don't think it has quite the cohesion of the filmed Red Rock show. And I think that's most likely due to the fact that it was recorded over 3 different shows. I believe 1 song was in Boston, 2 were at Red Rocks, and the remainder were recorded in Germany. But regardless, the album does introduce fans to the pre-boy single 11 O'Clock TikTok, and also the song Party Girl, which was the B-side of A Celebration.
Which actually was never released in the US.
I know a girl called Party Girl. I know she wants more than a Party Girl. And she won't tell me her name. Oh no, not me.
Yeah, and I'd call the version of 11 O'Clock TikTok on Under Blood Red Sky definitely definitive.
Agreed. I think it's where you can hear the wide open version of the song opposed to Martin Hannett's compressed production that was on the single.
Yeah, and I'd actually also throw in 40 as being definitive. Also of note, the Red Rocks home video was a huge seller. And this is when Island Records start noticing U2's back catalog is selling like hotcakes.
Right. And at the same time, it gets better for U2. They do their first tour of Japan with a stop in Hawaii. Also, all of this happening in November. And it was during a sound check in Honolulu on November the 16th that the band comes up with the germ of a new song, one that later gets fleshed out and is named Pride.
Yes, and so what a turn of events, right? From almost being dropped on the October tour, then War takes off, the Sunday Bloody Sunday video from Red Rocks becomes immortal, and suddenly U2 is up for a new deal with Island, and now they hold all the cards. All they have to do, Melody, is write War 2, and they're the new Who, right?
That's right.
But U2, being U2, they have other ideas. They want to go chase their muse on their next record, and they have their heart set on Brian Eno producing it, and this time they won't take no for an answer from him. And what's more, they've decided to record it in a castle.
Which is where we'll leave things until next time on Into the Heart of U2 podcast.